All right. So, welcome everyone. I'm calling from the fringes of reality in South Portland, Maine, and I'm the director of the Enneagram Center for Transformation and Change. And today I have the gift of having Nelson Marsh here to chat with us and explore Type 5 and what it's like to live in that kingdom. And so I'm just going to open it up and just say, welcome, Nelson. Great to have you. And just tell us, about where you learned about the Enneagram, how that's come to you, or anything else that occurs to you.
Oh, well, I don't think we have time for that. But,
Type 5 jokes, you name it.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, as you know, I came to the Enneagram through you. Kind of got introduced into our life and some with my family, and I kind of had been through the gamut of all the typology programs and read a big pile of Jung and all, and none of them were driving with me, and so my dad brought this to me and I said, I'm not doing another one of your personality type things. You've got enough boxes to shove me in. But bribed me. There was a restaurant at that first little conference we went to in Birmingham that you gave, that little talk. There was a great restaurant around the corner, and he said we were going to lunch there and we were going to meet the chef. And so he bribed me into coming. And I went up there and I read up on it and kind of thought, maybe I'm a 2. I had some 2 tendencies, but really was still thinking about all that from kind of the behavioral level. And then, we kind of went through all the types. And when we got to the Type 5, I mean, it was just resonating with me so deeply. And I remember it was almost like having your clothes disappear in a crowded room. It was startling because you started talking about the Type 5 and this inner world, this walled city that they build up in their mind, and they let a few people peek at it, but no one gets in there. And so, and I went, how did he know about that? I didn't think anybody knew about this. And it really was quite the revelation. And then, we did some coaching together. And then when it really became valuable was when I became a father. And then later I went through a very trying divorce. And for me, over my journey with it, I guess probably the biggest takeaway from it over time was it started giving me license to feel my feelings. For 5s, our feelings are terrifying things. We don't feel them. We put them in jars and say we're going to deal with them later. But all the 5s, I have a warehouse full of jars. And, and sometimes we can be quite moody when those bubble back up and we unexpectedly have to get into one of them. And they go, why are you mad? And you go, because I had someone said something rude to me 7 years ago or whatever. But it gave me license to start dealing with those and feeling them. And then really to stop seeing myself as this conceptualized, disjointed being. I really ended up in a position in my life where I was always praised for being smart and for academics and and also for keeping a cool head. And so I had leaned into my ego structure so much that I was quite proud when I was sitting there conceptualizing myself and everyone around me and not realizing that I was, withering on the vine as a person within it.
Yeah, those are beautiful images. And so when you look back on, childhood, adolescence, teenage years, how did you navigate your 5-ness? Like how did you survive and take care of yourself?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons. It's interesting. So I have quite a few friends who are 5s who've gotten involved with the Enneagram. And I think if you do get involved with something like the Enneagram, then this disposition and that capacity for learning and for knowledge, really it can be a wonderful and powerful thing, as challenging as it is. But I think if you don't ever get access to the well and the to the people that can help you get out of that. For a lot of fives, we just end up having our ego structure so reinforced, we just go further and further and further into our heads. I mean, I was, I want to say 7 or 8 years, I never cried. I mean, just completely shut off from my emotions, and really seeing my life reward me for that. And so it can be a very harsh place, the inner headspace. And of course, this is anecdotal, but for me, and then the other fives I've known, especially 5-wing fours, I'm a 5-wing 4 with a dominant sexual instinct and then a huge self-preservation blind spot. So I'm kind of a cannonball. And so the other ones I talked to, this quiet place, it's not like a 9's quiet place. It's not soft and fuzzy and pretty. It's like full of, nails and spiders and and it's old and angry, but you can get reinforced to get in that. And I think I always think about older fives that I meet, especially older 5 men who lived in a time when it wasn't as acceptable for men to embrace their emotions and be fully present. And my heart weeps for them, because they're so far inside themselves, and they've spent their whole life in this city in their mind, building the walls higher and higher and higher. They don't even know there's a world outside of that. And they don't even remember why they're building those walls. They just keep building them up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, a powerful impression. So, sometimes fives have said to me, it's so easy for me in an interaction to go into my head and analyze what's happening, and that my heart, even though it's only 1.5 feet from my head to my heart, can feel like 1,000-mile journey. And so the question always becomes, what helped you to start accessing your emotions and to even stay there long enough? Because, for sometimes fives will feel like if I start to feel, I could be annihilated at any moment. It's not safe here, right? So I wonder what has been true for you and your growth around that.
Well, I definitely identify with that. I mean, we always, I think, forget in talking about these, we glass over the fact that these are coping mechanisms. They served us for a time and were useful, and they are ways that we can survive, but maybe not necessarily ways that we can thrive. And for me, I mean, the biggest part was becoming a dad. If you're a head type and you like being in control, a screaming infant is a great way to realize your place in the world. It's a big dash of humility. But really it was, for me, after I had my daughter, it just started with, it always starts with awareness. And it started with the awareness of saying to my then partner, and I say this to people in my life now, I don't, those feelings aren't available to me. I am not emotionally available right now. I let them know, I go, I feel cold and distant. It's not because I don't love you. I just don't have that available to me. Acknowledging that when you get to that place, not trying to glass over it or act like they're just being hysterical or something like that. But then, after that, it really sucks because emotions are hard and I hate them. And so what you had to do is you have to have time to go through your emotions. And I, this is something I read from some other fives and kind of took it on, is that you've got this queue of things in your mind. And I find for fives, we tend to have to make it through the queue. Nothing ever drops out. You can add to it, you can take away from it. But that's why, if your fives don't have alone time to think, they get really, well, it's because they got 6,000 things that they've thought about, and they need to go and, research what color antelope feet are or something stupid. And so what I did was, just like I would do that with my thinking, I applied that to my feelings, and I started having feeling time. And it's brutal, but it's very simple. I start in the beginning of the day before anyone's had a chance to dump stuff on me. And I take a situation and I go, what am I feeling? And immediately my mind pops up and starts conceptualizing, right? And I say what I think and start analyzing. I go, no, not the time for that. What do I feel? And I drill down and I make myself feel that. And when I feel a feeling and it comes up, I sit there and I just try and hold with it as long as I can. This is like doing push-ups. It started with, I could do this for about 2 minutes and I was in a bad mood all day. and now, I try and get 20 or so minutes a day to process my feelings. And I often do it while I'm working on things. That's a good way for me to do things, working with my hands. When I did pottery, I did it on pottery wheel. But just working through those kind of pushed a pressure relief valve of all these emotions that have been just eating me alive for years and years. And what it did for me is it kind of showed the lie for being a lie that I think we all fall into. And that's that if I am present, if I'm loving and kind and engaging with the world at the best enlightened version of myself, it's going to eat me. I have no defenses. And that's just not true. It's something that we feel, but for me now, being connected to my emotions and to the world around me is challenging, but it's beautiful and it's rewarding. And before, it was just terrifying.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. It sounds like it's been a progression from bearing with terror to becoming more able to be with emotional states longer, to finding out you won't be destroyed. And that's the arc of I think a lot of people, but it's one of the things that often said about the 5 is like, if I open my heart, I'll have no strength to rely on. I'll be like a dry leaf that can be blown off into oblivion at any moment if I really allow that container of my heart to open, and I end up in the dark void of the nihilistic universe forever to stay there. So when you think of the fears that come up, it sounds like one is of being destroyed. Anything else that pops up for you that, consumed by the ignorance of the world? Or
yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of it seems like a lot of the 5 energy is that base need to be smart and to know and to control the world by knowledge. I think a lot of that fear in relationships and what makes it so hard is wrapped up in the nature of not feeling understood. Probably the most frustrating thing for me in so many of my relationships in my life has been that, you be with people that in your life that maybe you're not particularly self-aware, and maybe they're to the point in their life where they know they're not self-aware. My father, and he's a type 3, and for type 3s, they know that often self-awareness is a blind spot. Well, 5s are painfully self-aware, and so we're sort of watching that nature documentary where the alligator eats the baby antelope, but we are the alligator and the baby antelope, and we're like, oh, look at me, I'm going to do something. This is going to be really bad. Why am I doing this? And so we feel powerless to change it. But there are many good things about being a 5. And I mean, I don't know what it's like to be anyone else's type, but by my reckoning, it seems to be the easiest. And so one of the good things is you are self-aware. You know what's going on inside of you, and you want to tell the people in your life how to deal with you. I think what happens a lot of times, and what definitely happened for me, is you try and tell somebody what matters to you or how to deal with you, and they brush it off as something casual, or they overanalyze what you're saying and think that you're trying to play some game or something like that, when really you're just being very, very direct. And so for me, getting in my current relationship, a wonderful thing has been that my partner now knows that when I'm showing her things that I care about, when I'm showing her things that I love, I'm letting her in to my walled city. You know, that's an enormous act of trust to show people my ideas and to teach. You know, fives love to teach, and that's a great way that we express love. And it's not a good time for critique because it's going to make us close off and get angry. And then, you know, by extension, because of that, to sit down and go, hey, when I say this is how I need you to approach me, I really mean it. Like, that is actually what I need. I've had enormous success with that, but it has been a frustration. And I think one of the primary fears is always being misunderstood. I know it's still to this day, if somebody says I'm not making sense, or, oh, you used too big of a word there or something. I had somebody tell me that we were arguing in politics the other day, and they told me, they said, you sound uneducated. I told them, I said, I sound a lot of things, but uneducated is never one of them. But that's a big fear, I think. And probably one of the, in daily life, I think, and especially in our work life, probably the hardest thing as a five that I have, maybe the perfectionism and having conversations in my head and forgetting that I didn't have them with everyone else.
Well, share a little bit about, one of the things that I've got a five in my life who's a physicist, and he says, I have an interior of wealth and intelligence that I can go into at any moment, and it's so vividly exciting that being out here with you folks is actually kind of boring. It's because the way my mind works, it's just like almost like a lightning show, and I see the dots connect, and it's vast and always interesting. And I don't really need you to entertain me because I've got this, cathedral in here. And then when I come out and I talk to you, it's kind of dumbed down a bit. I'm going to go back into my head center. So I wonder what's been true for you and your journey. Like fives often have some beautifully stockpiled interest packages, 20, 35 rooms that they can go into and just nest themselves. So what's been true for you? What resonates for you?
It's funny, I think of mind palaces or a advanced mnemonic technique. And I have the great curse of having an eidetic memory. So mine is rather large. And I think the interesting thing is, I always think about the Roman generals. There's a story, and who knows it's true, but that during the ages of great expansion, the great Roman generals could walk through a legion and know every man's name, and that they would organize the legions and the battalions and all into a city in their mind, and they could remember enormous amounts of information. They'd also remember maps and ways to travel incredibly long distances, all sorts of things. That very much is what I often feel like. I mean, in your head, yeah, you've got this amazing space, in my head, like, I can always pull one of my memories out. So I love music just dearly. It speaks to my soul. It's one of life's few true joys. And sometimes I'll sit there and fives can be preoccupied or spacey. Well, they're probably watching a movie in their head. They're reliving a memory. They're listening to some music they like. They're having a cup of coffee in their mind. I mean, it's really, there's this huge inner life. And it's hard because, everything is what you make of it. Nothing is positive or negative. And I think being a five and having that huge inner world, it does give you a lot of space to ideate and create, and really it is a beautiful retreat. And you can be curious. Its ability to take in and process information gives you the ability to be preoccupied and be heady and go places and find something interesting anywhere. But it can also make you distant from the people you love. And for me, an enormous amount of the journey has been through coming in touch with the world and realizing that I am a part of it, not separate from it.
Mm.
And probably the biggest thing I consistently have done for that has been getting out in nature. I mean, really, anyone who thinks they have problems, because everybody's got problems, go stand in a bamboo thicket for an hour. And if you can still be a nervous ball of energy after that, then congratulations, you have actual issues. Because, to get out there and be in something that's much bigger than yourself and put down your intellectual vanity for a minute and just see it. Or, another one that we did recently, I love the stars. And we went to one of the international dark sky spots, the darkest places on earth. There's one near Jacksonville, Florida, in the Okefenokee Swamp there. And it's stunning. I mean, it's the greatest light show in the world every night of the week. You can see the whole Milky Way with the naked eye every night. And it is breathtaking. And I think especially for fives, for everybody, but especially for fives, it's so important to get out there in that and just let that childlike sense of wonder that drove you towards curiosity anyway, let that come and flow through you instead of just being this pent up ball of thoughts. And I always think of an artist that I love who wouldn't like being called an artist, but I always think of Rothko. And, he did, everybody gets onto him because he did the paintings that were one gradient of color. That's all they were. But they're quite spectacular if you see them in person. And what I love about them is he had such an ease about being non-figurative and not having to attach a concept to a feeling or a moment or an emotion. I think that for me has been a wonderful thing to do is, when you go somewhere, don't take your camera, don't take a video, don't take your pen and paper, go and be present and experience it with the people that you love. We went to this dark sky spot, and I have a degree in photography, and I did not take my camera. And I sat there with my lady and we sat under the stars and set fire, and it was spectacular and magical and fleeting. And it was just a moment. That's all it was. And it was better for it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, so if you'd share some of the directions your curiosity has went, what you've found captivating and went and explored and maybe have a library full of curiosity points. Like what are the things that have grabbed your curiosity from the weirdest to the most normal or ordinary? What's there for you?
Well, really, I've always been curious. Anytime I see something, like I've always wanted my dream job that I would love to have is the guy at the airport who watches the x-ray scanner. Because I just think it would be I could sit for the entire day and watch x-rays of bags. It seems like an amazing, and I would probably pay to go and do it. But it just seems so fascinating in how people pack their stuff. I could do it for hours. Anyway, so really it started in college. I mean, the real awakening into leaning into this way before I got to the Enneagram stuff, which was, or I guess right about the same time. I had a friend who was a Sufi, and he introduced me to the poet Rumi, who's incredible, and into the kind of thoughts of Sufism. And then that really, the pure joy and curiosity that they had just really touched me. And I said, man, I want some of that. And so the next thing it led me into was a good friend of mine was a Japanese Zen Buddhist. And he put me on to Wabi-Sabi, which was the aesthetic branch of Japanese Zen Buddhism. And it posits that the world is ephemeral and that everything passes away. It's all like a sunset. And so you should treat everything as temporal and temporary, including ourselves. And that was really kind of gave me license to not try and hold on to everything and kind of push back some of that avarice. and it was really off to the races after that. I got pretty heavy. Always loved cars. Got heavy into cars. I've probably had 100 of them. I got grease on my fingernails right now. And I worked at a college, at a shop in college with an incredible mentor of mine for free all through college to learn to work on old Beamers. And then I went, at the same time, I was also working at a tea shop for free. By the way, working for free is a great way to get around great people that you can't afford to talk to. And I worked there for 3 years, and I fell in love with tea. And then I studied abroad in Italy, and I got into the wine business. And I leaned on a great skill of mine. Bullshit. I went in Italy. I was. They said, you're coming to this culinary school. Do you want to take a wine class? And so I signed up for all the wine classes they had because I figured everyone cool knew their wine. But I was only 16 or 18. And so they call me and they go, hey, these are professional classes for people in the industry. I was like, look, man, I grew up in the industry. I'm the most wine-loving wine guy you ever met in your wine life. I'm gonna be teaching you the class. And they're like, whatever, this kid's gonna flunk out. But I knew we'd have a little time, so I got there and I bought all my textbooks and read them cover to cover and bluffed my way into the wine industry. And then I came back here and I was still, a kid. But I was in Alabama, so I just said no one ever, asked their sommelier if they were 21. So I just started doing the work. I've been in the wine business since I was 18. And then after that, it was glass blowing and pottery and painting. And these days I've gotten some friends of mine had kind of pushed it off and kept me from getting myself injured. But I finally have gotten into motorcycles. I bought 4 of them and they're amazing. That's what I was working on last night. And then all those, of course, had all the other things, right? Like I got into working on cars and I wanted parts made on a lathe, but I couldn't find anyone to do what I wanted. So I just figured out how to use a lathe. And then I learned to weld and to paint cars. And I don't know, it's absolutely endless at this point. Oh, and woodworking. I have a side hustle. I do tables. I'm doing a dining room table right now that I think it's 1,600 pounds. It's a giant, this huge steel dining room table out of virgin cut American cypress. And it's been so fun because you kind of master one thing. And then now I'm on wood and, with metals like wood for dummies, because you can always weld another piece on or grind it off or whatever. But with wood, you have to have so much forethought and sympathy for the material. It's a joy. But if that's what you're asking, in directions of pursuits, that's where I am. And I guess I'm down the music rabbit hole these days. That's probably, I spend probably 2 hours a day intentionally listening to music.
Awesome. No, yes, you did cover, you answered that quite eloquently. And so thank you for that.
I know you appreciate my verbosity always, right? Michael does a coaching call with me, and then you have what is it? It's like a 2-hour call, and I talk for an hour and 47 minutes of it. And Michael just says, "Let's just notice."
That's right. That'll be another one of your dad's cards that's laminated. So you grew up with apparently 2 assertive types, right? A type 3 dad and a type 8 mom, and which is really a different kind of energetic presence than a 5. And what was that like for you?
Well, I'll illustrate it with this wonderful little tidbit of trivia. So I was my dad desperately wanted me to love sports. And I was scrawny. I couldn't play football. I wasn't good at golf. They just couldn't get me to run around enough for tennis. So they settled on baseball and they made me an outfielder. And I got kicked off of 2 baseball teams in the 7 years my parents made me play for laying down in the field and falling asleep in the game. And could not give a shit. And then we were there. One time I was running from the ball and everyone's yelling at me, run, run. And I stopped running and I said, could you all be quiet? I'm running as fast as I can. And so, yes, it was very different. And I distinctly remember looking at at like all the stuff that they would do and be so energetic. And what the hell are you going on? Why are you making so much noise?
Yeah. Well,
It was a very interesting thing. Now, granted, the other thing is, I think the good thing was there's a great attitude around personal growth. My dad fixed totaled cars and then he fixed old houses before he moved on out of that. So I grew up with my parents always learning new things and solving problems and working on things, and we built things. And so that was a very healthy environment. And then, also it's worth noting my mom is really a healthy person and has always exhibited a pile of 2 tendencies. In fact, I think it's still hard not to type her as a 2 because she's just so caring and loving and always there for everybody. And so, I think most of that experience could be summed up. With my mom, it was always easier because I got 8 in strength. And so I kind of admired that. With my dad, we were on completely different wavelengths. And I think we spent the first 25 years of my life just not understanding what the other one was saying. For him, he was thinking win, win, win. And I thought, what is a dumber goal than winning? Like, who would ever want that? But what I figured out is, for him, winning is like feeling smart. For me, it's like knowing. And
good point. And
there's been the Enneagram's been a huge part of it, but there's been a lot of my life I was just fussing and arguing with my dad. And I told him a ton of times, when I was a very small child, I was like, you are stupid and your ideas are trash. And I don't know why you care about this. But what I didn't realize was, I was expecting when we talked about things, he would go and he would ideate and he would cast this grand vision. My dad is extremely charismatic. I always joke he was a wrecked used car salesman and evangelical preacher at the same time. And
great combination.
A great combination. And and he's brilliant and can do anything. And so my dad's always this very magnanimous, exciting person to be around. And I was always very serious. Even as a child, I don't think I ever really knew how to be a child. So my dad would, say this idea or something he was feeling. And I would be like, you haven't constructed an argument at all. And I think we did that for a couple of decades. So it was an interesting time. But I did have that experience that a lot of 5s do, where we end up having that reinforced. Like, I always wanted to be an artist. That's why I got my photography degree, because I wasn't a very good painter. But I always wanted to be an artist, and I loved doing that. And I remember telling my parents when I was a kid, I said, I just really like to learn. I just want to know everything. And I would like to be left alone and make art and build things. And they said, and they were just mortified. And they said, and to know all that and not share it with the world? And I said, yes, that sounds amazing. And so I was encouraged, though, away from my forewing, away from the art and the culture and, that whole joie de vivre, and into my head center even deeper. And I think, a few of my good friends kind of have the same stack as me with instincts and all. And they live very much as products of that, ended up in positions in life because they were encouraged to act on their ego structure. And I think that's one that, 5s and 3s get that a lot, and 1s also, that if a 3 ends up in something competitive, people are just going to push them to compete. And the same thing, if a 5 can get into a position where they can use their mind, then it's almost like the world is there helping you turn off the tap of the real energy of the five, which is curiosity. And it's, you know, and every five knows this, we're all super sensitive. I mean, we all feel very deeply. The reason we're terrified of our feelings is that they impact us a lot, and we're not comfortable with them. But that's the real energy of a five, is to be, you know, the loving teacher that shares things with people, that is appreciating and curious about the world, and that has this wonderful open heart and open mind. You know, they're this delightful go-between, introducing people to new things and bringing love and sympathy and empathy. You know, I always tell my five friends that if you want to feel good about being a five, go and give someone a really meaningful compliment. You know, fives are kind of famous for having this intense venom about their words when they're angry. And I can certainly have that too. But the other side of it is, you can really notice where someone is, and you can speak and really touch someone's heart. And that is, I think, me at my best, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful teaching, really, around how do I combine wisdom and curiosity with compassion and love, and extend that to the world. So yeah, so thank you for that. And then I was thinking, you used the word idyllic, or what was that kind of memory you have?
I did it.
Idyllic. And is that similar to photographic, or what's the definition?
Well, okay, first, photographic memory is not a scientific term. There's visual eidetic would be what that is. The eidetic memory is a class of memory. It's a memory disorder where in certain things you remember everything in excruciating detail. So, for instance, as a consequence of my eidetic memory, I'm a true visual learner. Most people are operative learners. They need to do it. I can watch people do something and know how to do it. So I spend an enormous amount of time like watching YouTube videos. That's how I taught myself to run the lathe and work on all sorts of crap. How to work on watches, I repair watches, was watching people do it. And I can sit then in my head and watch that happen again. And so normally, and this is something that I think a lot of fives will appreciate, like if I'm doing a project, I'll tear it apart and put it back together in my head 30 or 40 times.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that's part of that. And then but what people don't realize is, so they meet somebody who has maybe a visual eidetic memory, that they remember everything they read and they see the words when they read them. What they don't realize is it's a memory disorder. Your memory is not supposed to work that way. That's not efficient. And there's always a deficiency. So one of mine is names. I'm horrible with names. I mean, I'll meet someone, I'll go, man, you know, 3 years ago, I have a wine bar. We have the largest selection of wine by the glass in the world. So 500 wines by the glass. I run the whole list out of my head, and I'll see someone go, man, you know, I remember we had this wine. We talked about this, and your mother grew up here and whatever. And I cannot remember their names ever. I mean, it's a miracle that I can remember my future in-laws' names like half the time. It's so bad.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, that's part of that. And I think probably a lot of people end up with these sorts of memory disorders where you have these odd memories, but they don't, it doesn't get shown off. And I think because I'm a 5 and I have this need to build my mind palace, it kind of shines a light on that. I think if I was a 9, no one would ever even know.
Yeah. Well, I like that, the term mind palace. That's awesome. Really great image. So you mentioned a word, which is the passion of the 5, which is avarice. And one of the definitions of that is this aversion to having too much emotional contact with people, because it can feel like it will drain my energy, or too much contact with people because it'll take away from my time to build my mind palace, But also, so there's a kind of a retention around, I'm going to guard my emotional space and my time for study and going into my inner chambers. But what resonates for you when you hear that term, avarice?
It has been that idea has been the hardest thing to break for me. And avarice takes a lot of forms, I think. I always, the guarding of energy, I think comes from the same place, but I would say definitionally, it's probably more jealousy than avarice, right? Which is a aversion to losing something you have, not a need to acquire something you lack. But I think, I always think of Parliament Funkadelic, which anyone who doesn't like Parliament Funkadelic doesn't like music. Go listen to the first 5 Funkadelic albums and tell me you don't love it. But there's a great track called Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts. And it's 14 minutes of space music. And in the middle, there's this like sermon that George Clinton goes. And the takeaway line is, be careful of the seeds you plant in the garden of your mind, for seeds grow after their kind. And I think as a 5, we often are farmers for our worst traits. And a lot of people do this. I think other types do this too. We go, oh, this is my avarice, my collection of things. And it's not that, I just can't let go of things. It's that I'm a curator. And this is my little museum, and look at my stack of magazines that I've had for years. The order tendencies inherent in the 5 are strong. So I guess from the 2 sides of that, one, from what people tend to think, which is this acquisition of things. Yes, there is always a need because there's this need for new things, especially if you have the dominant sexual instinct. You're going to go out in the world and acquire new things. Here's the magic. Give all of that shit away. Just give it away. I give away more stuff. When I buy something, I go, oh, I'm starting a new hobby and I'm going to do this. And I'm going to give up on it. And so I just need to find someone who loves it and give it to them. And books, I give away books like crazy. I have tons and tons and tons of books. But if I'm holding with a loose hand, and if I see someone who has I have something that they're going to use and enjoy, I give it to them, and it makes me feel good. And then Mary Catherine doesn't have to kill me for having more junk around the house. And the same like cameras. I've had hundreds of cameras, and I've just been slowly giving them away. I've realized, there are 3 of them I'm going to shoot. And the rest, when I meet a young photographer and I go, man, you should really shoot this. This would be good for you. I just give it to them. So that's been the breadth of that. Is generosity is the cure, and you will feel better if you're generous. It's in and outflow is important. Now, on the guarding your time and guarding your emotions, that one's very hard for me. I think there is a shining place of resplendence that, not to sound all new agey hippy dippy, but there's something that when you're at your best, when you're living at your best, that the interactions you take outside of your head become recharging instead of depleting, right? They're energizing you. And I think all 5 see this when we teach. If you feel real bad as a 5, if you're really down, go find someone and teach them how to do something that you love, and you'll come away beating. That is kind of the lowest level of interacting with that beautiful curiosity. So I think there's a certain amount of that, but the emotional state, I personally, maybe this is just me. I always think I'm going to feel like there's a battery, and I do have a battery and it gets depleted. But what I figured out is the game isn't to not let people in and not let people around. The game is to not do things that deplete you. If you go and spend 2 hours with somebody, it's okay to need alone time after a lot of time with people. That's normal. But if you go and spend 2 hours with somebody and you come away feeling like you got hit by a truck, don't do that. They're bad people. You don't want to hang out with them. It's not, I tell you, I just read a book, and it's a business book, but it was probably the most implicating thing as a 5 I think I've ever read. And it was, it's called Necessary Endings. And it's a book about pruning. It's a book about the kind of the whole broad thing is these 3 types of pruning. Everyone knows if you're going to prune a rose bush, you cut all the dead leaves off, or the dead branches off. And then you cut dying or diseased branches off. That's easy. But the 2 that nobody talks about that suck are you cut perfectly healthy branches that are keeping other branches from growing. And then you also cut branches that could never be truly great. You cut all the branches that are non-starters. Those have been the hard things in my life. And of that avarice to, we have avarice with people too, right? I'm afraid I'm going to lose people. I try and build a menagerie of people around me. And that's really extremely unhealthy. And so learning to let go and the seasonality and the temporality of things, I'd encourage any 5 what's been a journey for me is there's this natural nihilism and you go, oh, well, I could die at any minute. And that's kind of great. One day I'll get out of this thing, mercifully life will be over and people will leave me alone. But I would encourage to turn that towards the moments in our life and say, hey, everything's temporal, trying to hold on to this stuff, your energy, your time, a moment, a memory, you're raking water. You're not going to do that. Go stand in the middle of a river and try and hold the river. It's not going to work. And so you have to acknowledge your place in the universe if you're ever going to get out of that. And that's something I'm fighting. I've here recently again gone, man, I just have way too much stuff. And I've started getting rid of stuff. And but it's not just physical possessions. I have too many obligations. I had too many relationships that aren't bearing fruit. And also, I've been giving, with this idea of the mind palace, I've been giving space in my mind palace rent free to a lot of things that just don't belong there. I would encourage my 5 friends that, and do often that, there is a version of your life where you lay down in bed and you can be in your head and in your walled city or your mind palace, but it's just pretty. There's nothing is attacking you and trying to kill you. You don't have to lay down with a tornado and wake up with a tornado.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And, I think what might be helpful is just like you said, that you've had tried to help people understand what your needs are, and that, one of the sufferings you feel is when they don't understand it or take it seriously. So I'm just curious about, what your instruction manual that you give to people you care about so that they have a sense of how you operate. Like what is that? What are those needs that are important for you?
Well, I think for me, it's always like the classic 5 thing. With my closest people, I need to know that I don't have to have the answers, and that it is safe and reasonable for me to show my emotions and just feel with them. That's a very hard thing to come to, but that's something I think that comes later in relationships. But it is important to note that when a 5 is being emotional, they're being vulnerable, they're doing something they're scared of. And so that's a time for great empathy and caring and sympathy. And if you want to, if they piss you off and you want to, browbeat them over it, wait a few hours. Because if you do it when they're in that open state, it just clams you up, and it can really hurt a lot more deeply. 5s can have brutal intellectual arguments. But if you actually have a really difficult emotional argument, they don't have a lot of capacity for that. The same, and this is, I was married for a while to a very unhealthy 6. And I I have a few close friends that are 6s. And one thing I have to tell them is, hey, I don't have the capacity for worry you do. So if you put that on me, you're going to feel fine, just spewing a bunch of negativity and worry. And I'm going to be dying on the inside, and it's going to break me for 3 or 4 days. I can be macabre, I can be morbid, but actual worry, something bad's going to happen. I can't inhabit that emotion. But then the other thing is, I real early let them know how I work when I'm stressed. And I have to tell, so in all my close relationships, I tell them, if I get stressed or I'm in an argument, I'm not feeling, I'm thinking, and I'm acting out of thinking. And you definitely don't try and push me to feel if I'm not there, because that's only going to go bad. But understand that it's not that I don't care. It's not that you don't matter. It's that is not available to me right then. And I have to get back to it. And, and so I'm not just being an ass, this is where I am emotionally, my state as a person. And then usually, in my very closest relationship, I print and laminate a set of rules. Oh. And it's like, it is so helpful. I just go, hey, these are my actual needs, so like one of my rules, with my, significant other is, if you told me something, I'm still at what you told me. So don't assume I'm a mind reader. If you said we're doing this, I'm where you left me. I put a pin in that. I said, awesome, that is done. I'm doing this over here. And you come back and you go, did you do any more about that? No, obviously not. So that one's been super helpful. And one of the biggest ones has been, in relationships, choosing on both sides. This is especially important for 5, because we can tear apart situations in our head and kind of vilify people, is generous assumptions. I make a very, very conscious effort, and I expect my partner to make a very conscious effort to assume the best in me, and I assume the best in them. And I think that's important for all relationships, but especially for 5s, it's an important practice for us to sit there in a situation and go, what are they feeling? Where are they coming from? What are they, what are they really trying to say? Do I really believe that they intend to hurt me? Because it's so easy to catastrophize and build things up, to get obsessive.
Yeah. Well, so, one of the things that we talk about for the 5 is when they're under stress, and it continues as they go from being present and open to getting more and more isolated and withdrawn inside their head. And I think I remember one time you said something that when you're at down the levels of health, that people start to show up as concepts rather than actually living people. So I wonder if you would share a little bit about what that, what it's when you go down the levels, and also what is there a wake-up call or wake-up calls in there that kind of bring you back?
Oh, this is my wake-up phrase, and I don't know why, but it plays in my head. There's this constant stream, like a ticker tape, and what flies across it every time is, it's like I was driving yesterday and I was like, this is stupid, I hate this. And I was mad. I was working on something and I couldn't find a part. And I said, what is a part? Why is a part? Where is even a part? What is all of this? And when I start thinking that, well, what is a screw? Then I know I'm conceptualizing, and I'm just mad, and I probably need to eat something. And, so it's that, for me, that conceptualizing is there. And the most dangerous thing is when you take that tendency as a 5 and you almost build a menagerie of the people in your life. And you stop, it's very easy when you conceptualize people to not view them as people, to dehumanize them, and to not view them as changing and alive. One of the hardest ones for this has been my relationship with my ex-wife, which has at times been contentious, as anyone who's had a divorce knows. You know, we have a daughter together. And so when I see her, I have to remind myself that as much as my life is changing, her life is changing, and that impacts our daughter and how we raise our daughter. But I can't just go, I formed this image of you. This is how it is forever. I'm going to hang this painting on my wall, and that's just it, you know.
Yeah.
Daiwa Zarathustra. No, that doesn't work. And that's continually something I fight against, though. And it's interesting. I found a great exercise for that to be coming to really I've been doing a lot of music meditation with non-pentameter music. So the classic one being Sun Ra. Brilliant. I love Sun Ra. The guy recorded 160 studio albums and inspired Miles Davis from Birmingham, Alabama. He said he was an alien from Saturn and drove around in a Cadillac with a pyramid on the side of it. He was amazing. Brilliant. He was a virtuoso player in 3 types of horn, I think, by the time he was 20 and got bored and broke music. That was his whole life. But I listen to him, or I've been listening to Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders. But what I like about it is, you know, if I go and listen to some pop song, it's telling me something that's happening. It's saying a thought. When I listen to like really great interpretive jazz or you know, classical music or whatever, you can embody the thought and the moment of its creation. And that's really been a great way for me to, that's kind of been a meditation that I take on daily that helps me do that.
Awesome. Well, you know, if you were, I know you've given encouragement along the way, but just any particular things that you wish somebody would have said to you when you were, you know, in a younger phase and just, you know, navigating life with no map necessarily. I mean, well, what were the kinds of things that might have helped you during, you know, your challenges growing up?
I think if when I was a kid, and like, I have a very good friend whose son is a 5. And I told him, I said, you should tell him as much as you can, there is nothing wrong with how you work. Who you are and how you are is good, and it's beautiful, and it's just different. There, you know, I think a lot of 5s spend a lot of their time feeling like an alien. And so encouraging belonging for a 5, and that you accept them where they are and understand that they don't work like you if you're not that same type is amazing. And then for young 5s, you know, I really wanted to know that I was sufficient and I was enough, and that I was safe to feel my emotions. That's what I think what it really was, is like, I wish somebody would have just grabbed me and shook me and said, your emotions are not going to eat you. They can't hurt you. You're fine. You can crack open that jar anytime you want, and you can feel, and then you can go back, and you're not going to lose your mind. You're not going to go insane. Like, it's okay to feel those things.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing is just to, you know, to the acknowledging of how temporal and temporary we are. I wish that earlier in my life I would have been encouraged and had access to the good wisdom that, hey, you're not going to be here forever, and nothing's going to be here forever, and that's okay. Hold on loosely to the things in life, because if you know, it's like, I mean, it's like holding a chicken. You know, if you'll strangle it if you grab it too hard. You got to hold it gently. Those y'all from Alabama have never held a chicken, probably. But anyway.
Do they hold chickens there in Opelika?
There are chickens here. We have a chicken ordinance. You can have chickens.
Yeah.
Brad has chickens. Brad's got a ton of chickens. The more you know. But but yeah, it would just be that you can hold on loosely and feel that. And the one thing that I got a lot, and I kind of always wanted to give context to, was that when I started out, everybody said, you can't do this in your head. And to an extent, that is right. You often need support, you need people in your life. But especially if you're as a 5 and you're just starting to make sense of yourself and build methodologies and ways to work with how you are, it's okay if the first part of that work is really in your head. Get good input. But, for me, it was 2 or 3 years sitting out underneath the stars before I could wrap my head around the way I really worked and really have self-awareness that I felt like and what my faults and flaws and deficiencies were, and really actually move forward. So it's okay if it takes you some time. This stuff is hard, and it's always going to be hard. I don't think it's easy for anyone to go and work on themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, true all the way around. So one thing that sometimes 5s will say is that their relationship with their body can feel like it's kind of distant, like, and some have joked, well, my body actually is the taxi cab for my head. And there's been sort of stories around 5s that sometimes, like when I would hug a 5, it's almost like they don't bring their whole body forward and really, not like a type 8 that gives you a power hug, right? But
Yeah.
5 is kind of like a kind of gentle connecting with your body, but and then often notice, like when the 5s sort of walk through space, that it isn't, it's like something a little bit different than how most people operate in their body, and it's not linear necessarily. There can even be kind of an unusual movement that isn't necessarily male or female, and it's sort of like, well, as a type 5, I kind of, the planetary body I inhabited isn't like the rest of the people running around here who are jocks and playing sports. And then to add to it, just something around touch, that because 5s are so sensitive, it's almost like you're going into an electrical force field, and you touch them. I've known 5s, and I touch them, they sort of, if they're not prepared for it, it kind of sends a shock through them. So what's been your experience of your planetary body and how you inhabit it?
I would say those are all applicable to me. I mean, I told someone recently, there's a crackhead I'd stopped somewhere, I was hauling some stuff, and I told them, they put their hand on my arm, and I said, I just want you to know, if you touch me again, I'm going to shoot you. So yes, I think I've always felt like people are like, don't you worry about your body and how you feel? And like, I always had like a really high pain tolerance, because I don't care. This is this dirt suit that I ride on. What do I care about this damn thing? If only you could see the piles of scars on my hands from working on shit and whatever. And I don't go to the doctor like I should, and I forget to eat and all that. But I really, if we're being honest, me and my body were not on good terms. And the first time I can remember the first time I ever felt like my body was actually me, like this thing that I go around in is me, because it always felt like something separate. It was the first time that I did psychedelics. I did psilocybin in my yard, and I went out there and laid in the grass, and I was like, oh my God, my body is me, and also me and this grass and this big pecan tree are in an ecosystem and are completely interdependent upon each other, right? I breathe out CO2 that it uses to give me oxygen. So we've got a carbon exchange going on here. And it was so powerful, but it is hard for me to stay in. And so, I've done yoga a lot, and I love yoga. That's a great one. It can be a little high barrier of entry, and also depends on, some of these yoga studios are just like, full of the kind of people that fives hate, that they would make they would dictate, right? We would make fitness gurus illegal, sorry, punishable by death. But so for me, the big saving grace was getting into working with my hands more. I was always an artist and I love tinkering on stuff. I always every time I get out there and use my hands, get my hands dirty or get real good and tired. I mean, go and do some actual manual labor. I feel closer to my body. I can identify that. And it really is kind of strengthened those bonds between me as a person and me as a temporal thing. And it's really been such a blessing. I think one of the harder things I ended up in is that it's very easy to live a life where you never do any manual labor and you never get dirty now. Like a lot of people will go there a whole life and never actually get dirty or never go do real manual labor. I'm not talking moving a couch. I'm talking split 4 cords of firewood or chop down a tree or wrestle an engine out of a car. That's dirty and hard and miserable. And but it's good for you. It feels great. And so I always say kind of the mantra for me around that and connecting my body has been, I am a physical being. I live in a physical world. And so and I don't do the social media stuff and all. I got off of that was unhealthy for me because it just encouraged me to be more in my head. But I got out there and I started making physical, tangible things. These tables started because I wanted a better dining room table and they're crazy expensive. And, go, for anyone who's never done it, go order a set of hairpin legs on Amazon for $35, get you 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood and glue them together and screw up a table for you. And you will feel so accomplished and you'll go, I built that. That is mine. It's all this other crap I just bought, but that's mine. I made it and it inhabits the real world and I use it and I have a relationship with it. That's really been my way back to my body is by using it in that creative impulse to take some of the stuff in my head and put it out into the world. And it's been incredibly valuable, but it is difficult for me. I'll never go to the gym. I already figured that out. I'm done. It's not going to happen. The only solution that I have is to do manual labor things that are hard. I can get exercise that way, but it's, like a stationary bike. I would probably kill myself if you put me on a stationary bike because I just think it's all of the work of a bicycle with none of the benefit. And so, that's been a big thing. And, and it's hard too, if you're one of the types that you have a connection with your body, it can be really painful to watch a 5. I watch, me and my partner, she's self-preservation is her first instinct. She's a 9 with a 1 wing. So we're very different. And she's very in touch with, she'll go, yeah, I'm a little cold. I'm a little hungry. This blanket isn't soft enough. I want that blanket. And then she's like, oh, you're bleeding. You got your hand. And recently I got this huge gash down my arm and I was out there bleeding and she's like, aren't you going to put a Band-Aid on it? I was like, well, it's too large for a Band-Aid. And if I put a Band-Aid on it, I'll just have this on my arm and the motorcycle won't be back together. So I don't have that natural connection. And so I have to remind myself of it. The good thing is that has given me the opportunity to do very hard things. And I've started using my body to drag me out of those depressive states. The 5 energy is a depressive energy. And like all 5s, I get depressed, I get morose, melancholy. And now a friend of mine taught me this years ago, and it's been one of the best things I ever did. They said, if you're ever really miserable, go and scrub your baseboards. Because when you're done, you're still going to be miserable, but the baseboards will be scrubbed. And, do something you don't want to do. But I've really used that. And when I get to those states, I pick something that I really don't want to do, that I just hate on my to-do list. I mean, that's been sitting there, and I go do it. And normally by the end of it, I'm physically tired, but I'm emotionally lifted. And so I've started using my body as a way out of that. But that was not natural. I mean, that for years, I remember just thinking, why do I have a body? I would love to just be a brain in a jar. And I can't tell you that if somebody offered me a brain in a jar position, I wouldn't take it now.
Well, Mr. Stephen Hawking got to have a relationship like that with his body.
Right. I think why he did so well, he probably didn't mind. My most impressive thing about Stephen Hawking was he had not one but two affairs.
Well, look, this has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate everything you shared. Is there any last thing that you haven't addressed? I know we could probably go a couple more hours, but anything that's on the top of your priority list that you'd like to say about fiveness before we close?
Yeah, I'd say 4 5s, 2 5s. I would say those things that are unnatural to you are the area of your growth. That's where you are going to find peace. Being in touch with your body, being in touch with your feelings, inhabiting the real world. That the only way out is through. And you can, and I would say that if being hard on yourself and being hard on everyone else was going to work, it would have worked by now. So stop doing that, because it's stupid. And then for people dealing with 5s, I would just encourage you that, a 5 has a great capacity for knowing themselves, usually, and ask them what they need, and then expect to have a wait a while for them to give you an answer. They're going to go back, they'll process, they'll bring it back to you. But ask them what they need and then follow it, and you'll probably have a good time with them. Most 5s can tell you exactly what they need. And if you follow the rules, they just light up and they're happy. 5s love rules. You give them the rule. Oh, these are the parameters we're working under. They go, oh, this is great. And be patient, because the thing is, when a 5 is being distant, when a 5 is being harsh or conceptualizing, it's not because they want to be. It's something that they are feeling that's as scary to them and as difficult to them as it is to you. And a lot of the innate ways that they are, it's very, as far as the types that I know of, it kind of has the one vibe. It's a type that you're kind of stuck with it, and there's a lot of stuff that comes along with it, and you can be a healthier version of that, but they're always going to be heady. And they're always going to be a little scientific in approach to things. And you just need to be patient with that.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm gonna turn this off for now.